The Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks podcast, Series 2, AI in the AECO and Beyond, is brought to you by Oculi. Oculi, bridging the intangible. Hello and welcome back to Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks, the podcast about technology for the curious and creative here in the AECO and beyond. We are continuing our series on AI and what it is and what it does in the AECO. And this week we are honored to have Craig here to tell us all about rendering with AI. Tell us about yourself, Craig.
Hey, Carl. Yeah, so I'm the director of digital technology at a company called Ewing Cole. We're a pretty good sized firm, 500 plus people, offices across the United States. And I lead the design technology groups and the digital media group at my company. Been with Ewing Cole for just 2 years, actually. 2 years, 2 days ago, in fact. And part of digital media, design technology, of course, AI. How could you not dive into that big bucket of snakes, huh?
Absolutely.
So my background, I studied architecture and landscape architecture and business. So I have 3 degrees, 2 from a pretty good school called Penn. And I got into technology actually, but by request of CEO of the first big firm I worked for, a firm called Kling Stubbins, and only looked back once.
That's a pretty common thread or story that I hear for those of us that end up on sort of the technology side, is that we didn't necessarily ask to be there. We maybe got volunteered, but once we got there, we kind of found our way and enjoyed it nonetheless.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, it comes easy because it's enjoyable and interesting, and I actually found it more interesting and engaging than the design side of things, which is, it's hard to say, going to a pretty good design school, but it's true.
I completely agree. The delusions for me, the delusions of grandeur of design and all the great buildings that I could design, I started to learn very quickly when they were all the same box. They all looked like this nice little square, that maybe the design aspect wasn't for me, but making them work, maybe that was. And so that's why I went down the technology road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many aspects. You study architecture or any kind of design, and you find, once you get in the field, that there's a lot more to the field than just designing the greatest, widget or the greatest building or whatever, which is pretty fascinating. So I've been in the industry for, gosh, 20 years. Oh my God. So that postgraduate school. So long time, I guess.
Absolutely. And as you're mentioning, on the technology path, a lot has changed in that. A lot has changed in the last couple of years, let alone a couple decades, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and what's funny about AI now is so when I joined Kling Stubbins and sort of got into this role of directing design technologies, I was a huge proponent of Revit. That was the future. It was going to be change our industry, like, significantly, and not untrue. Lots of changes, I think, happened, but not to the degree that the hype was making it out to be, for better or for worse. And so, every time I look at a lot of the hype around artificial intelligence, I sort of think back to that time of when BIM was first introduced, and sort of see a lot of parallels, see a lot of sort of commonalities between the hyping up of how things are going to change. And so I'm able to sort of, I try and temper the hype a bit around AI, and don't feel that everyone's going to lose their jobs to the technology. So
Well,
So
and that's
start out with good news for everybody.
absolutely, and that's the good thing. A lot of times that comes up is that it's like the robots coming in and taking over our jobs, and the reality, again, much like you're tying it back to BIM, is the idea that this is supposed to be something that's going to improve our workflow, take away the mundane, and generally give us more time to do the stuff that we want. And we saw with BIM, some of that was true. Some of that led to other challenges, but again, that's a different podcast. AI is going down that same road, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. So we're talking about rendering, huh?
I think so, and we've for those of you that are following along, this will be the fifth in our six episode series talking about AI. We've talked about general AI, we've talked about custom GPTs, we've talked about learning AI. We just recently talked about the idea of how AI is being used in the software development side. But I thought we certainly should talk about how we can do imaging, and not just the general image creation, but in the AECO side. A lot of times those renderings, those beautiful things we see stuck on the side of buildings of what it's going to look like, that's very important to the business. And how is AI going to help improve that and get it right? I think that's what some people are concerned about, is that I can say, hey, make a building that's 10 stories tall and looks like Frank Lloyd Wright and does this and does that, and it gives me a pretty picture, but can that ever be built? Whole different discussion, right?
Yeah, yeah. I actually just did a presentation to our associates group, which is sort of young, sort of future leaders of our firm on the topic of AI, and brought that up because a lot of them, a good number of them actually surprisingly hadn't touched it, either ChatGPT or MidJourney or any of the other generative design tools, which I was really surprised at. But in talking about it, I forget now where I was going with that.
The idea about being able to create an image, but not to be able to create what comes out of the image.
Yeah, yeah. It was just so right. So the buildings that we produce in MidJourney and ControlNet, et cetera, there's really no intelligence there. So there's no, a designer has intelligence. They understand space and how you occupy it, right? These generative design image creators is really all that they really are right now. They don't understand space. You look at an image and you can tell, you know what, that doesn't actually work. I mean, you can't really occupy that space. You can't use that. You can't even build that. It is very good though for just generating ideas and sort of getting you outside of that little envelope, that little box that your mind sort of sometimes find yourself in. But I think that idea of not being able to build or occupy the spaces that these image generators come up with, I think really resonated with this group of people, because it is very true. You look at the results of them, they're just not quite there. You really need an architect or interior designer.
Absolutely. And are you finding that with that, especially with someone that's a team that works in that, the architectural, the design is their world, that it's pretty easy to spot that, well, this looks good, we know that couldn't actually work. So on this side of the page, those that understand it, that's pretty simple. But it's when it gets out into the wild and people that don't necessarily have that spatial awareness of that something may or may not work, that it becomes a problem, or could become a problem, I guess is a better way to state that.
Yeah, I heard a story. This didn't happen to me personally, but I heard a story from one of our designers that said a client came into a meeting with pictures that were generated from AI to talk about the design of one of their spaces, which that would be a challenging sort of situation to be in. I think just for a designer who's not very well versed, most just up until recently aren't very well versed in using these systems to begin with, right? But then being faced with hey, look at this fantastic picture I just created in AI. This is what I want, right? I couldn't imagine what was going through his mind at the time. But yeah, being able to sort of look at the image and like, all right, well, you know what, this I like some of the things that are going on here. We could probably use this, but we can't build this. This is impossible. There's no such and such space, etc. So there are lots to learn in exploring these, and that's one of the reasons why I'm sort of driving folks in my company to just experiment with it, use it as much as possible, right? So I've got basically introduced MidJourney, Veras by Evolve Labs. So I think so some of the more typical ones, and then like Copilot, Bing, Meta, Gemini, if that's still what it's called. They can all sort of generate images at this point. Some of them are better than others. Some of them, MidJourney still seems to stand out beyond Dolly and all the rest in terms of its capability in generating images that look like real renderings, but they're still, of course, still not perfect. So I've introduced these tools and sort of given folks, the designers, access to them to use them however they want, along with doing some sort of trainings and walking them through, prompting and all of that, and then sort of let them loose. And I wasn't really keeping them tied down. Let them sort of play around as much as they like, no limits. And what happened was, and it was still occurring, is that some of the designers came up with just some fantastic workflows, and very in depth too. They really spent time developing and sort of reinterpreting the outputs that they initially got, merging them with sketches and merging them with other ideas, other images that they had or rendered, to sort of really sort of create a design that one could call that you couldn't say it was a cheat. There's sort of this implication that if you're using AI to design images or generate images, there's sort of an authenticity question, right? And I know we talked about that before at the acoustics conference or on conference. Authenticity is really important, especially in the design field. And so if you're plugging in a prompt and getting the response and running with that, I feel it's not enough work to sort of claim as your own. And sure, you're creating a prompt, okay, but there is this sort of question of like, how many steps of iteration in any of these tools, any of these generative design tools, do you need to take before it becomes yours? I mean, technically, according to the user agreements, it's yours, but that is it's a big question. And so the designers came up with these varied workflows, some of them, yeah, starting with sketches and having AI sort of interpret those based on a prompt, and then introducing other imagery on top of that, sort of blending them and just iterating and iterating and iterating. Our MidJourney accounts have like thousands and thousands of images. Sometimes I'll just go in and spend 20 minutes just like scrolling through the images that people have been using, because it's pretty fascinating to see what's being worked on.
That's pretty cool. I have a couple thoughts in that scenario. So I'll start at the beginning of the thought that you had there. The idea of where is it cheating? Where is it not your idea? But I'm wondering, like, how is it different than the lead designer, the principal architect that comes in and goes to their best pencil drafter or designer and give them their thoughts and have them make the image that you do. It's still their thought. It's the same process. It's just a different way of getting that outcome. Perhaps faster, perhaps able to get more iterations than having Sam do a pencil drawing 3 times. We get 300 versions of that to come through. So to me, the idea of whose property it is or whose idea is it, if it's taking the shortcut, I don't think holds water, but I can understand why people say it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thought, completely different, because I don't spend a lot of time inside of MidJourney. You mentioned you have thousands and thousands or hundreds and hundreds of images of things you've created. Does that start to perform or start to tilt MidJourney in a way for your designs? Do designers have a specific style now because they've used a prompt or a cue so many times that they're starting to get their own style inside of MidJourney, or is it not how that works? Is every prompt a new thought? There's no memory.
No, yeah. So, not that's noticeable. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure if it's got a memory, if it's sort of building a sort of design profile, but it's not noticeable if it is. And I don't think it is because it's based on the C. So I know that ChatGPT it's got a user profile on me and learns every time I type something new in. But yeah, I don't think MidJourney is doing that, which is a good thing
Yeah, yeah, good.
I think. Yeah.
Because it's similar, like say ChatGPT or whatever you're using, they have the ability, like you say, you can put up, this is kind of my thoughts and how I work. But even at that, it's still creating from new every time. It's just reviewing what you said and then creating from that. But it doesn't change the way that it creates sort of iteration. It's still a new creation, but we can give it some prompts. And I'm assuming it's the same inside of MidJourney. If you get a prompt that creates grass a certain way that you like, well, you remember to use that particular scenario inside of there, and it may get something similar, but it's a new seed every time.
Yeah. But the prompting piece of it is I think one of the key parts, right? Sort of being able to craft good prompts in order to get what you're looking to get out of it is really important. So I always advise people to keep track of the prompts. The new whatever MidJourney Alpha system does that for you, which is really nice. I have a OneNote that's just chock full of prompts from the early days. But yeah, I think the teaching people how to prompt well is key to getting good, at least for architecture and interior design, to get good responses out of it.
Well, in that scenario, the prompts are different. A lot of times, and again, back from the acoustics event, the idea of having a chat GPT type of scenario where you're having that conversation with it, the more sort of conversational you get and you ask questions back and forth, you get something you want more out of it. But with trying to create an image, it's very different for how you want it to look. And is it HD? Is it Ultra HD? There's a lot of sort of real technical stuff that goes into that would never be a conversational output, right? Or we
Right.
wouldn't have that conversation like that. Well, look at that beautiful picture that's high definition and 3 angles of the sun, and you wouldn't ever talk about that about something you would see. At least I wouldn't.
No. And it is funny to see some of the you can tell who's new at prompting and who's not based on how they're. But so far, it's been a good experiment to get as many people as we have into these different technologies. We considered creating our own using ControlNet and training it on our sort of previous designs, but a lot of our designers were like, I don't want to do that. I want to, doesn't make sense for us. We want to sort of grow our design aesthetic in new directions, not sort of stick with the old. So, and that was sort of surprising. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but it's sort of surprising when I heard that. But that sort of nixed the developing our own image generation tool real quick.
And was that disappointing? And then at the same time, not disappointing?
Yes, exactly. I was thinking, okay, you know what? This could be a lot of work.
The getting there is fun. It's the upkeep that's the killer.
Yeah. But being able to claim, you created your own AI for image generation. Hey,
Hey, put that on the resume.
Right. But we have been doing that we have done conversational AIs. So we've created a structural chatbot, which is kind of cool. That you ask it a structural question, and it'll respond based on sort of a bucket of data, sort of what we call fundamental design reports from our past projects. That'll give you a response, structural based response. So you can ask it like, what SI concrete do I need for a multi-story healthcare building in Toronto? And it'll tell you something
Cool.
based on our old projects.
Well, and is that based on something like a custom GPT, or is that just an interface that you've trained data locally?
So we've experimented three different methods. One, the first one we did was Fastbots AI, fastbots.ai. Pretty simple. You can choose your large language model and then fill your bucket full of data, and it processes it, and it was not that hard. Then explored using Chat RTX, which is, requires, a piece of hardware in-house, which is nice because it's in-house. And then the third avenue is on Azure. Azure has, which is Microsoft's cloud, if you don't know, has their own ChatGPT tie-in sort of web, they have their web sort of development platform, and you can build one up pretty quick there as well. One of the important things is maintaining the security around our project data, of course, right? And all our different reports. And we're doing a proposal chatbot as well, so that if we get an RFP, we're able to ask it to take an RFP question and generate responses similar to previous proposals in that market segment. But all of that data, of course, we like to keep our data secure. So exploring the different methods is important to make sure our data's secure, not shared.
Yeah, absolutely not. That's becoming more and more of a thing, like you say, the Chat RTX, where NVIDIA's on-prem solution, and it's becoming more and more accessible. So you do need an RTX, you need a hefty, I'm going to call it graphics card. I know that's not what they call it anymore, but you need GPU. But aside from that, it's 20 gigs of space. You can download it, you can set up, and you're off and running, choosing the LLM you want to use. A couple episodes ago, we talked about Olama, which is another open source tool to download and have a proprietary LLM of your choice running off of your computer using CMD, so command line interface, which is super cool. And it's actually smart enough that you can do multimodal in there. So you can say, go to this drive, look at this image, tell me what it is, and it'll do it. And it's all in command line. So for some people, that interface is a little clunky, but it makes it very lightweight to run and to use. And it's all local. Nothing ever leaves your system. And even like we mentioned, Copilot, the Microsoft solution, if you're a paid user of that, you get the big banner across the top that says, hey, this is my company and my information stays within. There's a certain amount of trust in there to believe that that's true, but that's the idea, is that there's a lot of these AI solutions that are free. And I firmly believe in the saying that's out there that if something is free, it's not the product you are. And that's the same with our data. That's how we train these things. That's how they get better, though. There is a flip side to that. If everyone said, I won't share my data, these things would never get better. They need that data. They need that thing to improve. But some data, like proprietary company information, isn't what they should be trained on. So there is a difference, but we do have to let them play. Otherwise, it never gets better.
Yeah.
To slowly bring it back into the rendering conversation, I have two questions. So the first one is about, do you use MidJourney or some other tool for things that aren't necessarily like an architectural rendering building? So if I need a logo for a new company website, or if I need an image, or if I need a quick caricature, or do you have other image generating tools that you use besides MidJourney, or can it handle all of that?
So MidJourney's been our primary tool. We don't limit anybody in terms of what they use. If they prefer Dolly, I know one designer prefers Dolly. Hey, you know what? Go for it. But MidJourney's just been a solid staple amongst people. So that's the one we've used the most. And then another one we've been using is Magnific, which is sort of image upscaling. It's a little different image upscaling, but it's pretty impressive in what it's able to do, especially if you take like a Google Earth map and plug that in there, or Google Earth satellite image and plug that in there. It does a great job upscaling that and making it look pretty realistic, or at least a lot better. And then what else? We've got a number of different subscriptions that we're using, and they're all not coming to mind. I should remember this stuff, but I honestly, I spend most of my time, if I'm generating an image, I'm using MidJourney. If I just, I could use something else. It's pretty solid. I guess Adobe Firefly I'll use, but I don't find the results as good as MidJourney. So, but if it's specific, sort of, I need to change this little spot, well, I'll often use, generative tool in Photoshop.
Interesting. I think that comes down to sort of two things. One, anytime you're paying for any of these subscriptions, you get more functionality, you get more out of it than a free version, and you also become familiar with it. So you can make it do things that maybe it's not necessarily designed for, but you're familiar with it, so you can make it do things. I'm a big fan of Adobe Firefly. Again, I'm the guy that tries everything, so I pay for nothing. So yes, I am the product, I'm aware. But I find that the Adobe Firefly does a really good job of what it does for what you're asking for. Again, general image creation versus not. So I think that's a really cool tool. I also have been using, there's a tool called, and the name escapes me. Look for it in the show notes, people. But basically, it's a play on Instagram. It's a word that's a play on Instagram. And what its claim to fame is that it actually gets letters right. So if you want to create just a simple image that says Bob's Catering, it will actually create an image with the letters right 97% of the time.
Yeah. That is one of the challenges with MidJourney, unfortunately. Fingers and words.
Yes, the fingers and words. So
Fingers and words.
I like to keep things simple so we don't have to worry about the fingers, but the words. Ideogram is the name of it. Again, I know it was like
Ideogram.
Instagram,
Okay,
but
great.
yeah, it's really cool. Again, free version, but it does really good with the word part. So that's always the biggest bane, is trying to fix it or change the words that it spells wrong when you're doing that. So
Yeah. Just trying to think of the other tools that we use for image generation. Yeah, so I know like the Meta's tool actually apparently does a good job with words, generating, graphics with words correctly. Which for architecture, if you're doing like a company facade and you need their logo up there, their company name up there, then up at the top of the building or on the marquee or something like that, then that's handy to have. But
yes,
we're all designers, so we're all good at faking it in Photoshop.
I was going to say that's the next thing, when you have that skill to take the basis and correct it yourself on the other end. I
Yeah.
find that Microsoft's Designer, so the editor part of the Copilot that comes with their version of DALL-E, that actually works pretty good. And the way that it will let you remix an image, you can remix an image and then you have like 15 different, steampunk or whatever, but you can sort of remix on top of a remix and make a change and change subtle elements that again lets you get pretty close to something, again, as a general image, not so much for something that looks realistic, for something that you want to look as a stylized steampunk. Or I'm a big fan of their 8 pixel, their pixelated stuff. I think it looks really cool.
Huh.
Now the other question, again, got off on a side tangent there, was when it comes to the architectural renderings. Do you find tools like Veras? I think there's a few other out there that allow you to say, hey, generate an image of what this would look like based off of geometry or massing that's in place. So we're starting from not just words, but we're starting from an actual, size and schematic. So it takes away some of those issues with sizing and space. And
Yeah. So Veras has been really handy for that, and I think one of the reasons why it's so popular, that and because it's plugs into Revit and Rhino, the two main sort of programs that we use at Ewing Cole, and yeah, it does a great job at getting us far enough down the line with sort of renders, quote unquote renders, that we can then take that and sort of process it in Photoshop, or bring it into Magnific to upscale it more, kind of thing.
And one last question before we get to our end of episode hacks. But at the beginning, we kind of talked about the idea of, the rise of BIM and how now we're seeing sort of the rise of AI. And one of the things that I used to run against back in my training Revit days was we would get people and it started to do a little bit of inside rendering, a little bit of stuff inside, and they would do a quick rendering that would take 6 hours, but they would get it and they would send it to a client, and the client would come back and say, hey, this is great, I want this color of red that's in this brick, and they're like, okay, so we know we can do something like that, get a nice real-time rendering, but now we want to step back and make it more stylized so the client understands that this is brick, color to be determined later. This is, so we don't give them too much of a real thing where that becomes the ipso facto what they're getting. We want to give them the design intent, and they bring that back. Are you finding that being an issue with the AI generated renders, or are we not at that stage yet?
No, so actually, surprisingly enough, a lot of our designers don't do the photorealistic, don't look for the photorealistic renderings out of MidJourney or AI tools. They have a tendency to watercolor them up, to be honest. It's I was really kind of surprised. I mean, I get it because you don't want to give the client, too much of a finished, project or rendering to sort of disillusion everybody. So I think more often than not, that's what's being seen at least in conceptual. By the time, we're well into DDs and we're doing the sort of final renderings, then that's where, that's where Photoshop comes in and you tweak the color to the to what the client's looking for or what the material actually is. But I don't see, I haven't seen that as an issue. At least it hasn't been raised at all.
Well, and I think that's good. And maybe that's where that comes in place. The idea of the stylized image does twofold. It gives you that image, that idea of what it is, and so everyone can kind of see what they want to see into it, which is what you want from that client, to bring their ideas, to bring their things, and to guide you down to a thing. But without that sort of thing, oh well, this isn't what I had in mind. Whereas if it's a bit stylized, they can have their own thoughts. So I
Mhm.
think that makes sense. Again, from the guy that's the technical, not the designer. So take that with a grain of salt that it's intended. With that in mind, we've easily blown through our half hour, as we always do here. So before we wind things up, I always like to get a hack from our guests before we close out. So what's hack or tip or trick can you offer us to sort of go with today's theme?
So I think one of the hacks that is most appreciated and not often thought of when generating imagery or just exploring artificial intelligence is using artificial intelligence to sort of teach you how to prompt. And so one of the things I always tell the designers who are learning AI is find an image that you like, that you've done, a rendering that you've done, or any kind of image. Plug that into MidJourney and ask it to describe. It's a MidJourney function, and it'll come up with, I think, comes up with 4 prompts that it sort of discerns from that image, and you can learn the sort of prompting language that way, and it's really helpful in understanding how to craft a good prompt.
That's brilliant. And I've heard that before, sort of like with the chat GPT type of scenario, where have that conversational, ask it what you want to learn from it, and it will tell you. I mean, so it makes sense that same thing's available in the rendering. But I think that's a great hack, to let the tool you're using tell you how to use it best.
Yeah, yeah, it is, because and it's one of those things, like prompting is one of those things that sort of, it takes time to learn. You can read up about it on the internet in lots of different places and find lots of different opinions towards it. But the best, sort of most reliable source is really MidJourney, because then you can take those prompts and you can have it generate all of them and see how close they're getting to your original image. And then you're like, that works. I'm gonna start crafting mine, what I'm looking for, that way. So
Yeah, so then it becomes
useful.
twofold. It's a learning exercise, and then you're getting better outputs at the end of it. So you become the from the grasshopper to the master as it goes through, and you become quicker, which is what we all want AI to do, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Having the AI look at itself almost is useful. I do that with ChatGPT. I'll ask ChatGPT to generate ChatGPT prompts. Really good.
And then you take them over to Gemini just to confuse it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, we've come to our end. Thank you so much for being here, Craig. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of Wrenches, Gadgets, and Hacks, where we explore the tools, technologies, and time-saving hacks that are shaping the future. If you
Hey, thank
enjoy this episode, remember, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's down here somewhere. And stay tuned for more insights into the exciting world of AECO and technology. Until next time, keep building, innovating, and exploring the possibilities.